Hello, my name is Kathleen Delgado, and this presentation is on indoor air pollution from cook stoves. In previous lectures, we discussed air pollution, types of air pollutants, and potential health repercussions. More specifically, we talked about indoor air pollution attributed to cooking or heating in lecture 10.3, where we reviewed dung cakes briefly. And in this presentation, we'll take a closer look at indoor air pollution from stoves like those that use solid fuels and patterns observed globally. The purpose of this presentation is to better understand the impact of household air pollution from an environmental health perspective. And specifically in this presentation, we're going to take a look at world regions that use solid fuel mass. And we'll take a closer look at some statistics that are attributable to household air pollution, and we'll look at patterns that look at solid fuel use over 3 decades. And we will also be taking a look at clean cook stoves. I hope to emphasize through this presentation the connections between the most vulnerable populations and showcase ways that world organizations are taking steps to address this global issue. As you can see here in this table of contents, we have a few different graphs. Again, we'll be looking at world regions that use solid fuels. We'll be looking at deaths that are attributable to household air pollution, specifically in 2012, by age and sex. And we will be looking at deaths attributable to household air pollution in children ages 5 and under. And we will be looking at 3 decades worth of solid fuel use per region from the 1980s through 2010. And we will again be looking at clean cook stoves. According to the World Health Organization, almost 3 billion people in low and middle income countries still rely on solid fuels for cooking and heating, and these solid fuels are namely wood, animal dung, charcoal, crop wastes, and coal. In 2013, World Health Organization reported that the populations in Africa and Southeast Asia most often use solid fuels, Africa being 79% and Southeast Asia being 63%. When looking at deaths attributable to household air pollution in 2012, specifically, we can see that women indicated in red and children under the age of 5 indicated in blue make up the majority of the total number of deaths in 2012. When looking at the total, that's about 2.3 million deaths per year. And these are very vulnerable populations because, as you can see, it's children that are under the age of 5 and women that are under age 25. When looking at the population of men who are under the age of 25, almost 2 million deaths are also taking place each year. In the previous slide, we looked at the distribution of deaths among men under 25, women under 25, and children under the age of 5. And when looking more closely at the deaths attributable to household air pollution in children under the age of 5, we can see that through this spatial graph that there are a vast majority of deaths reported in African nations. We can also see through this graph that Afghanistan is also marked in red, similar to the African nations where over 500 deaths per 100,000 children occur yearly. And these same areas are also known to be low income, high poverty areas, and they may not have access to health care. Through this line graph, we are taking a closer look at solid fuel use by world region. from 1980 up until 2010. And we can see that the patterns of solid fuel use, that they've been slowly decreasing. And we can see that the trends in higher income countries starts in the year 1990 and through 2010 remains very low, almost at zero, whereas the trends for lower and middle income regions of the world, they've had much more slower declines. And this is especially noticeable in Africa, where a steeper decline has not occurred perhaps as steeply as we can see in the line that looks at Southeast Asia. And this data is particularly notable because it still excludes the use of kerosene, which can have potentially also hazardous health effects on a population. It's only looking at solid mass. Through technology advances, we have many clean alternatives to solid fuel mass cook stoves, and an organization known as the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves is a public and private partnership that's hosted by the United Nations to support a market for clean and efficient household cooking and heating. It aims to call for 100 million households to adopt clean cooking methods and fuels by 2020. Their initiatives are focused in Bangladesh, China, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and Uganda, mainly through 2011 through 2014. And additionally, Guatemala and India were added to the list in 2014. In summation, we can see that there is an enormous health risk associated with household air pollution. We see that overall, the use of solid fuels has decreased from about 60% of homes in the world in 1980 to about 42% of homes in 2012. 3 billion people still are affected worldwide, and the number of people using solid fuels is expected to increase according to the World Health Organization. And we know that for people without electricity, the risk of exposure to health hazards that are associated with household air pollution is much greater, and we can see through the data that those who are most vulnerable to disease associated with household air pollution are women and children. And we learned that current initiatives from organizations like the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves and other initiatives like the United Nations Initiative on Sustainable Energy for All by 2030 are currently working at the moment to address the issues associated with solid fuel combustion on a global scale.